While it's had its ups and downs, wrestling wouldn't be the same without Monday Night Raw. WWE's weekly show changed how wrestling on TV was produced, and despite being on the air for 25 years, it shows no signs of slowing down. So, let's take a look at how it began. Raw actually began as a successor to another WWE show, which was known then as the WWF, that show being Primetime Wrestling. Primetime Wrestling began airing on the USA Network on January 1st of 1985. Despite being the predecessor to Raw, the show was very different. While the format of the show changed a bit over the years, the main premise remained the same, recapping highlights from the WWE syndicated shows and showing matches from untelevised events, or house shows. This format became very popular with fans, likely because of the chemistry the hosts Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon had.
These guys are costing me a lot of money. All you paid for was my lousy ticket, and this you could call lunch?
Hey, I want you to feel at home, pal.
Well, you don't want the brain to sign one then, do you?
Last pair of buns I signed was a stripper
Would
named
you
Kitty Litter.
stop? That's not necessary.
Well, you asked me.
But in the early 90s, WWE saw a downturn in attendance and viewership. A big reason for this was because of the steroid scandal in 1991. While the WWE owner, Vince McMahon, was acquitted of all charges, the scandal hurt the WWE's business. So after airing for almost exactly 8 years, Primetime Wrestling had its final broadcast on January 4th, 1993, and a brand new show would take its place. On January 11th, 1993, the very first episode of Monday Night Raw aired. Its presentation was radically different from any other WWE show, the biggest being that it was broadcast live, which meant live crowd reactions as well as commentary. This is also how it got the name Raw, being that it was uncensored, uncut, and a fresh new experience. However, the weekly live format wasn't financially sustainable, so shortly after its debut, Raw would broadcast one episode live, then air a pre-recorded episode the following week. For much of 1993, Raw was broadcast from New York and a handful of venues across the state, with the Manhattan Center being used the most often. But on September 27th, Raw would have its very first broadcast outside of New York, when it emanated from New Haven, Connecticut. But New York continued to be a market that Raw regularly visited. It wasn't until 1995 that Raw would leave the state for lengthier amounts of time. It was also the year when Raw would hold its very first episode outside of the US, when it broadcast from Brandon, Manitoba, Canada. 1995 also saw the debut of a new Raw set. The brightly lit entranceway was replaced by big, bold, red letters that spelt Raw. It also received a new theme song and intro, as well as graphics. But the biggest event of 95 was the birth of Raw's rival, WCW Nitro. One of the advantages Nitro had over Raw was that it was live every week. Raw would typically have one live episode, then be followed by 2 pre-recorded episodes that were filmed in the same venue as where the live broadcast emanated from. Something else that hurt the WWE was that WCW would sign a number of WWE's biggest stars, and this continued to happen for a few years. Throughout the rest of 1995 and the beginning of 1996, it was pretty back and forth in terms of ratings, usually with one show generating a higher viewership for 2 weeks and then it flipping for the next 2. Following WrestleMania 12 in March of 96, Raw saw a bit of a lead in ratings, but in June of that year, Nitro began its dominance over Raw, as it would surpass Raw's ratings for 84 weeks straight. Jumping ahead to February of 1997, Raw would expand from a 1-hour program to 2, in an effort to compete with Nitro, who already had 2 hours. Also in February, Raw would broadcast from a different arena each week, with a fewer amount of recorded shows. In March, we would see signs of things to come, as the intro was changed from the bright, jazz-like theme to Marilyn Manson's The Beautiful People, which was changed just a few weeks later to the classic Thorn in Your Eye. The show was also renamed to Raw's War, and the arena got a complete makeover, featuring a huge screen above the entranceway dubbed the Titantron. We also began to see edgier and more adult themes and storylines, in contrast to WWE's long-standing, family-friendly image. This caused the 2 hours of Raw to each have their own name, the first hour being Raw's War, and the second being Warzone. The reason for different names for the 2 hours was 1, to communicate with viewers which audience each hour was intended for. Raw's War for when children were watching, and Warzone for when the later adult audience was watching. This also technically gave WWE 2 shows, instead of just 1, but they could also choose to average the 2 show ratings. So if Raw's War did 3 million viewers, but Warzone did 5 million viewers, then WWE could take the average and say Raw's War had 4 million viewers, even if it only had 3 million, which in turn meant they could charge more for advertising. WWE still does this today, which is shown by the copyright graphic that appears in the bottom corner towards the end of each hour. On the topic of ratings, Nitro continued to beat Raw in ratings throughout the rest of 1997, but something would happen that changed the tide. On the December 15th, 1997 edition of Raw, Vince McMahon introduced the Attitude Era. He said, quote,
"We've embarked upon a far more innovative and contemporary creative campaign that is far more invigorating and extemporaneous than ever before."
Some of the things that changed in Raw's programming were shorter matches and a bigger focus on storylines and having more surprises. That same night, WWE would change its logo from the boxy gold icon to the scratched white and red one, which has inspired even the current day WWE logo. Raw finally got a win in the ratings war with Nitro a week after WrestleMania 14 in March of 1998. The ratings stayed competitive throughout 1998, but 1999 was when things began to change.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to WWF Raw!
Raw's audience continued to grow, while Nitro's started to suffer. With this success, Raw finally aired live weekly, starting on August 23, 1999. That same year, the Raw stage would be updated. Since March of 1997, Raw had been using practically the same set, with some details added. But in December, the set would get a nice addition, mainly adding 2 rectangular screens to the sides of the main Titantron screen. It still echoes the very first Raw's War stage, but it's one that I personally like. 2000 brought more of the same. Raw was continuing to be successful, and Nitro was still struggling. One of the biggest events of that year was that Raw was moving from the USA Network to TNN. There was actually a court battle with the USA Network, trying to prevent that from happening. Raw and other WWE programming did ultimately get picked up by TNN though, due to the USA Network not matching TNN's higher bid for the programming rights, which was in the contract that the WWE and USA had. After months of legal battles, Raw would have its debut broadcast on TNN on September 25th, 2000. Skipping out to March 2001, WWE would buy WCW and thus officially put an end to the Monday Night War. Later that year, the Raw is War and Warzone names would be dropped and replaced by just simply Raw and Rawzone. This was because of the September 11th terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. Heading into 2002, there'd be 3 big changes that would shape the future of Raw and the WWE. In March, WWE would create a brand extension, which meant that Raw and WWE's other show, SmackDown, would have their own separate rosters and championships that'd be exclusive to their respective show, with the exception being the undisputed WWE Championship and the Women's Championship. Raw would receive the Intercontinental and European Championships during the inaugural brand extension. Raw would also have its own exclusive pay-per-views, but would hold big events like WrestleMania and SummerSlam alongside the SmackDown brand. While 2002 did have 2 brand exclusive pay-per-views, this didn't really go into effect until 2003. However, in 2007, brand exclusive pay-per-views would be no more. Jumping back to 2002, in April, Raw got a complete makeover with a brand new set, graphics, theme song, and logo. The large, widescreen Titantron was replaced by an angled 4:3 ratio screen, as well as 3 smaller screens to the bottom. This helped symbolize the end of the Attitude Era and the dawning of the Ruthless Aggression Era. The show WWE Heat also used this set, as it became a part of the Raw brand during the brand extension. It's also worth noting that this is around the same time the WWE actually became the WWE. The World Wildlife Fund had filed a dispute over the initials WWF, which it also used. The World Wildlife Fund won the court case, and World Wrestling Federation became World Wrestling Entertainment. However, the WWE's logo stayed pretty much the same. Later, in September of 2002, the undisputed WWE Championship, which was then renamed to simply the WWE Championship, left Raw, and the World Heavyweight Championship was introduced to the brand to fill the void. Shortly after that, Raw continued to hold the Intercontinental Championship, but replaced the European Championship with the Women's Championship and the World Tag Team titles. Now we're going to jump ahead a few years, to 2005, when Raw's contract with TNN, which was renamed to Spike TV by this time, expired, and both decided not to renew their deal. So, after 5 years of being absent from the USA Network, Raw made its return on October 3rd, 2005, and has stayed there ever since. Raw's return to the USA Network was actually a pretty big deal. In addition to featuring a lineup of legends and Hall of Famers, it was the first Raw ever to broadcast for 3 hours, and it brought in 6 million viewers. In 2006, Raw got a minor change. The logo and graphics were updated, as well as the theme song, going from Across the Nation to Be Loved by Papa Roach. The Raw set also had seen some updates by this time, mainly some panels added to the sides of the main stage. But a huge change in Raw's broadcast would come a little over a year later, in January 2008, when not only Raw, but all of WWE's shows would be upgraded to high-definition quality. Raw would not only be broadcast in full 1080i, but the entry stage was completely revamped. The set was filled with LED screens from top to bottom, and a huge banner hung above it all. WWE branded its high definition as WWE HD, and this logo was added to the top left of the screen. In 2009, Raw got into the mainstream scene a bit more, and started having celebrity guest hosts for the show. 2009 and 2010 were the biggest years for guest hosts, and after that, it slowly happened less frequently. Also in 2009, Raw would get a new theme song, Burnt to the Ground by Nickelback, which is one of my personal favorites. In early 2010, we technically saw the second Monday Night War. TNA Wrestling announced they were going to war with the WWE and moved Impact, their Thursday night show on Spike TV, to Monday nights to go head-to-head with Raw. It really had no effect on Raw, and it only lasted for roughly 3 months. Also in 2010, Raw would retire its red ropes and replace them with white ones. In August of 2011, the brand split came to an end, as wrestlers from both Raw and SmackDown were free to compete on either show, and championships were no longer exclusive to one brand. And as such, Raw changed its name to the Raw Super Show. Jumping ahead now to 2012, at the end of January, Raw replaced its WWE HD logo on the top left to now feature a hashtag. And in 2012, Raw hit a huge milestone as they celebrated their 1000th episode, which not only brought in a new logo, graphics, theme song, and an updated stage, but Raw also got expanded from 2 hours to 3 hours. With this addition, Raw would get rid of the Raw Zone name for the second hour, and all 3 hours are now just called Raw, but it's still technically 3 different shows. They also stopped using the Super Show name at this point. Later that year, WWE got in a partnership with Susan G. Komen, a breast cancer awareness organization. Starting in September and ending in October, Raw had Susan G. Komen branding around the arena, and most notably, changed the middle rope to pink, and they've continued to do this yearly ever since. On August 18th, 2014, Raw started using the new WWE logo, and thus, the set got a bit of an update. Additionally, the Raw theme song, The Night, got a remix. In March of 2015, Raw started making use of 2 LED boards on opposite sides of the ring, with 2 traditional ring aprons on the other sides. The position of these have changed a little bit over the years. Things picked up again in 2016 when the brand split was brought back. On July 25th, Raw would once again have its own exclusive wrestlers, championships, and pay-per-view events, again with bigger ones being open to both brands. Similar to 2002, Raw lost the WWE Championship, so a new world title was brought in, the Universal Championship, which was the same thing as the WWE title, but red. Raw also would receive the United States Championship, the Tag Team Championships, the Women's Championship, and eventually, the Cruiserweight Championship. Raw would also see another makeover, with a brand new logo, graphics, theme song, and somewhat of a different set. And actually, this new set didn't last for too long. On the Raw after the 2016 SummerSlam, the set would change again, this would have been significantly different from the Raw sets used in the past 8 years. This new set was basically made out of LED boards, and even the ring posts had LEDs around them. This also marked the end of the Titantron, which had been around for almost 20 years. However, entrance videos would still display on screens in the arena. Since then, there hasn't been any major changes to Raw. In April of 2017, during the Superstar Shakeup, the Intercontinental Championship got moved to Raw, and the United States Championship went to SmackDown Live. The stage has also gotten rid of the ports for the pyrotechnics, as WWE has gotten rid of the use of fireworks as a cost-cutting measure. Which brings us to the present. This year, Raw is celebrating its 25th anniversary. The quality of the show over the years is debatable, but seeing as how they're still on the air every Monday night, they must be doing something right. So, here's to you, Raw. Congratulations to everyone involved, both past and present, on putting on a show for us every week. Phew, that took a while. Thanks for sticking through it all. While I type away on the next episode of Wrestling History, feel free to check out the history of Renee Young. She wasn't as PG as she is now. Till next time, I'm Zach from Tap Out Corner, and I'll catch you later.